Welcome to this edition of When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine, a discussion of sustainable living and what that means to you and me. Coming to you from WOUB Radio, Studio B, I'm Jay Warmke.
And I'm Annie Warmke.
You are indeed. And today we're going to talk about solar cookers with Luther Krueger. But before Luther gets a chance to speak, Annie, you're going to jump in.
Yeah,
right?
Because this is one of my most passionate things that I have brought from my life for 30 years, really. So I already told Luther the first part of the story. So I was in China with UN Women's Forum, 40,000 women, all of us kick-ass women.
Mhm.
And I wanted to go to the solar cooker talk, and it was like my main focus out of hundreds and hundreds of places I could have gone. And so I get there, and there's all this excitement because these two women in beautiful traditional African dress are screaming in the middle of this hog field because they hadn't seen each other in 35 years, and suddenly they're in the tent together. But that wasn't the most exciting thing. So what ended up happening was these women that were giving the talk were from Trinidad and Tobago, and the electric company there had tried to take the land of many, many people. And so when the people wouldn't give up their tribal lands, their traditional land that their ancestors had owned for a long time, so the electric company cut off the electricity. So the United States Rotary sent these boxes, these folded down boxes that were solar cookers, and they sent hundreds of them. And so these women that were teaching the class had gone around and tried to show women how to use the boxes, how to get the most production out. But it meant they were going to have to change their recipes because you don't fry food in a solar cooker. And so the women thought it was great conversation, like work of art that sat in the corner of the room. But then, and this was the part that changed everything I did after this in terms of my organizing, social justice things, and my life, really, they said, we found out if we showed the women how to build the box, they would use it. And that's what they did. And they held off from the electric company, and they ended up winning.
Okay, so solar cookers changed your life. So Luther, you tell us how solar cookers have changed your life. Okay, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I've always been interested in the environment since I was a kid. Actually spent my junior high years in Bowling Green, Ohio, in this early 70s. After I think the last time they put out the fire on the Cuyahoga River, that kind of stuff got me into the environment. I was really concerned about the world. And fast forward to a different life, different career, and I started to collect solar cookers just because I thought it was a cool thing to do. And as I did the research, as Annie mentioned, Solar Cookers International has all sorts of information on the various worldly ills that solar cookers can cure. And so I thought, well, I'm going to get into it a little deeper. And I got to the point where I had over 80 cookers in my collection, and people coming to my solar brunches where I was just promoting it locally said, geez, you got a regular museum here. And so, darn it, it's a museum. And
wow,
from
that's
that
so
point,
cool.
yeah. And then I thought, well, I got to start using this theater major I got 30 years ago. And then COVID hit. I'd been to the Solar Cookers Conference in Portugal in 2020, just before the pandemic was declared. So I squeaked that in and met a fellow there, Michael Bonke, who has a podcast, sunpod.de, wonderful podcast about alternative energy, electric cars, and a huge focus on solar cooking. And I thought, I got to do that here, and I'm going to do video. His was an audio podcast. And he encouraged me to do so because he said, okay, now with the pandemic, I was hoping to get to the States and continue my recordings there, but now it's going to be on you. So I answered the call and road trip in September, October of 2020. COVID, masking up where needed, doing it outside where we could be distant, where we didn't need masks. And about 16, 17 conversations recorded later, I was hooked on using that to start gathering the history of solar cooking around the world. That was particularly in the States, but I've since expanded to Zoom calls with people all over the world. For me, it's just several reasons. Personal reasons, of course. I don't want to pay the power companies any more than I have to for the energy that I use. I have gas to my home, but I also have 6 kilowatts of electricity panels on my roof. Um, and so the solar cooking really helps me connect with the environmental folks in this region as well. Minneapolis Climate Action, for instance, I contributed a solar cooker as a door prize to their fundraisers. Um, so it's just been a great way to finally get into participating in the environmental causes without having to know that much. You might know a little bit of physics to know how solar cookers work, but really, once you see one work, when you feel the sun beating down on you, okay, that's energy. Let's put it in a box and cook something. So,
Well, why don't we back up a little bit and just explain to folks what exactly is a solar cooker? Because
sure.
I know we're familiar with it, but other people may be going, well, I don't know what they're talking about.
Sure.
So
Well, and talking about you can't fry things in a solar cooker. That there are different types of solar cookers. Some of which are like slow cookers, panel cookers, or they're just reflectors that reflect onto a pot, and you do some kind of heat trap thing. Maybe you put
Right.
a Pyrex bowl over it, or an oven bag, a turkey bag over it.
Well, we call those the ovens, and
Yeah.
I misspoke. I should have said
Oh no,
solar
it's
oven.
it's a matter. It's partly branding. Oven. You put a turkey or bread in the oven, but you want to fry. You want to stir fry. You got to put it on the stove top or in the
Right,
barbecue. So
right.
it's a little bit of semantics. It's no big deal. But there's probably about 5 or 6 really different configurations now. The original ones, as you probably recall from that conference, Andy, is the panel cookers, box cookers, where it's just a box with a glass lid over it, maybe some extra reflectors,
For
and
pilot, it was just plastic. The
yeah,
kit that came, and I gave them as wedding gifts to my kids of my friends and it turned out to be an incredible gift. It just pushed people, but they were just cardboard boxes with a reflector and an absorber, and that was it.
yeah. Well, and it does the job. And these days, if people really are impatient, they get a parabolic cooker, which is just like a
Yeah.
satellite dish. Some of them are 1.5 meters or larger, and they can stir fry. They can do some really high heat cooking. Some people have gutted the rear projection TVs that maybe get dumped in their
Yes.
alley
Oh,
or
those
wherever, and
suckers are
take out the
hot.
Fresnel
Yes.
lens.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but it's an exciting time to be involved with solar cooking now because there's so many new developments. One of the big objections to solar cooking is, well, when the sun isn't out, you can't cook. Well, technically, not right then and there, but you can cook to the point where you can put it into a hay basket. You can put like a pot of beans,
Hmm.
and once it's boiling for 10, 20 minutes, put it in the hay basket. It'll cook for another 2 or 3 hours. So you can cook after the sun sets if you've had that on a parabolic, for instance, or in the
So
Hanes or
Wait.
a
One.
hay basket is basically what, a box that's insulated with hay, so you're
Yep.
just retaining
Yeah,
all of
that's
the
an
heat.
antique. That's a really old-fashioned
Oh,
way
yes.
of solar, not solar, but thermal mass. But
Yep.
I wanted to say too that one of the things I realized, because I used to have a lot of different uh, options for solar ovens, because I would teach class on how to build one.
Sure.
And so we'd put them out when we had a tour, and we'd have little thermostats or thermometers in each one just to demonstrate. And on a cloudy day, at some point, I realized, wait, it'll get to 100 degrees even though it's cloudy. And so we would still put cookies in and get them warm, and people would be shocked. So it
Oh,
was
yes.
a great way. And that's the thing, people can be very inventive with reuse and repurposing, because the sun's so powerful. It doesn't take much, like a tire with a window over it. One time I was at a conference and I was teaching about solar cooking, and I told the guy who was very passionate about it, now listen, I'm bringing an inner tube and a window, but don't pump up the tire tube too much because it'll blow up. And he said, okay. So he went off to get it ready. And all of a sudden, there was the most horrible
Oh,
explosion.
no.
Fortunately, the window did not get broken and nobody injured, but it was powerful juju.
Well, I think some of the knowledge, once you understand the principles behind a solar cooker, we've been talking about in a disaster situation. Let's say there's
Right.
a hurricane or a tornado or something like that, and our government has demonstrated time and time again they're not gonna show up necessarily, right? You're kind of gonna be on your own. And we were discussing Solar cooker technology, people are sitting around going, I don't have any water. I don't have any clean water to drink. Well, you get a solar cooker,
Yeah, you
you
can
get some
pasteurize
water,
water.
you run the water through a bunch of sand to get the particulates out, and then you pasteurize it in a solar cooker. It can be a tire and a broken window, and that's that kind of, you can MacGyver your way to survival there.
Oh,
Well, it
absolutely.
takes
I
the
recall
ability to think.
I remember after Katrina, thinking
Yeah.
as the people were on the roof and thinking that they're probably, and this is like 12, 14, 24 hours after the levee had broke, and they're already talking about gas stations and the gas getting into the water. And so they probably had like a 6 hour window where they could have gotten relatively not safe water, but not contaminated with chemicals, and they could have been survived indefinitely. Unfortunately, on the hot roofs, but they would have at least had
Yeah.
pure water. Yeah,
We had just moved back from Europe, and we didn't really have TV for a while, but then we seemed to have TV for, I don't remember the reason. And every night we would look at what was happening, and I would be practically yelling at the television, "Look at all that trash around you, and you're saying you can't survive? You're kidding!" But its ability to think, that's the thing, isn't it? Reuse and repurpose.
So
yes,
is solar cooking, this phenomenon of solar cooking? We mostly hear about it in third world nations,
right.
primarily. So what are some of the applications there, and then what are some of the applications domestically, in a first world nation?
Sure. Well, I just interviewed a guy from my channel on a forum where we had a couple dozen people around the world, Martin Olthoff, who set out parabolics in the Bhutanese refugee camps in Nepal
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago. And literally, they were able to document that it stopped deforestation in its tracks, because as soon as they moved in, they started
Mm.
having to collect the firewood, and they really were kind of stuck there. So it just would have been a few years later, they would have had no forest. They would have been, half a day to go get it. But they were able to distribute, I believe it was 7,000 of these cookers for about 100,000 refugees. And that was enough to cook for them during the 9 or 10 months when they had almost total sun. So that's the first and foremost. I tell people, you want to stop deforestation. That's the very first best solution. Um, Unsafe drinking water in various developing countries where they do not have water plants. They don't have. They can't really rely on it, even if they do have it. Any water source, rain is obviously the best, but if they've got a stream or even a murky pond, they can pasteurize that water and at least have safe water. So that's one. They talk about refugee camps. There's a huge one in Kenya, the Kakuma refugee camp. I
Mhm.
remember when I first got involved with Solar Cookers International and got their newsletter, and the one headline was "Solar Cookers Prevent Rape," and I thought, okay, now they've gone off
Oh,
on
yeah.
the far
Yeah.
fringes. But
Yeah.
read the article. No, absolutely true. These are refugee camps are not very far from the real violent conflicts going on, and the women in particular are particularly vulnerable. And so being able to say you can stay in the camps, you're safe here, and you don't need to go get firewood. You don't need to walk 15 miles in, and the kids maybe being recruited into being child
Or
soldiers.
kidnapped.
All the
Yeah.
horrors that it can prevent. So those are just the three that are just the most visceral needs out there. For here, it's energy independence is probably the first thing.
Mhm.
It's still free. Solar thermal. Most of these cookers that you can get commercially are solar thermal. Some of them have a backup heating pad where if the clouds roll in or night rolls in, you have to keep cooking. You can plug them in and turn them on, and you can keep cooking. Um, there are other hybrids out there. There's a guy in Indiana who has a big barrel. He's converted into a box cooker with big reflectors, but he's also added a rocket stove off to the side that
I've
sends
seen
the
that.
flue into the middle and then out the top. And it's so efficient that when it gets out the top, it's still got flames coming out, so he can cook on the inside from the heat from the pipe. And the other, so if he has to cook with wood, it's very efficient, and he can cook for more than a family. And that's in Indiana. He does do that overseas as well. But here, it's primarily knowing that you don't have to turn on your gas range, which we are finding the word has come out. It has always been not as clean burning as we've been led to believe, as clean as it is. And I live in a very drafty old 1899 fixer-upper house where we never have accumulated carbon monoxide and so forth. But still, you're there at the stove and breathing this stuff in. Well, when it's sunny, we try to get out and cook every chance we get. And anyway.
Well, Luther, let me interrupt here just for a second to remind everybody you are listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke, coming to you from Studio B, WOUB Radio in beautiful and always sunny Athens, Ohio, reminding you it is indeed the end of the world as we know it.
Thank God.
Thank God. So let's end the way we cook, right? The slash and burn.
Yeah.
So we're joined here with Luther Krueger, and Luther is our leading expert on solar cookers. So Annie's
right, but I do have something
saying,
I want to say, because
okay.
you brought up a health issue, and I think this is across the board, whether you're in a developed country or an underdeveloped country, and that is that most of the people doing the cooking are the women. And so whether they're gathering wood and facing sexual assault or breathing in the smoke, and it's an issue for those of us who cook where we're using gas or anything like that. So it's a huge health issue, really. So I think solar cooking has a great benefit. And also for me as a farmer, when I was tearing down barns, and also when I was building the house out of trash, I fed the men that worked for me every day from the solar cooker, and they became great fans of it because it was just heating up leftovers. But they just felt it was so great because they never ate a fit lunch in their life, I don't think. And suddenly they were eating real food. And the novelty of the solar cooker helped them to ingest a lot more vegetables than they normally would have. So,
well, I wanted to relate. We did a project, Blue Rock Station did a project with solar cookers with the local fifth grade. And I was just thinking something like this is something that could be done nationwide to raise awareness. But what we did is we made about 100 couch potato solar ovens is
just
what we
want to
called
say
them.
150.
150 of them.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew it was a long time. But anyway,
It was a lot.
We called it the couch potato solar oven because we used a beer box, a pizza box for the top. We cut out with some saran wrap. We used some old newspaper
it was
as
an
insulation.
oven cooking bag, those clear oven cooking bags we used for the window.
And then of course it cost like $1.50 to make these things, and the kids decorated them with whatever they wanted to decorate. But then we had 150 of them out in the parking lot at the school, and they were all cooking out in the sun. And we were doing like nachos and stuff because we didn't want them all to accuse us of giving them botulism or something, So,
well, they made either salsa or, what's the other thing? India chutney, and they could decide what they were going to make. So that way they had something fresh. And they loved it. They were so excited to see how hot.
The parents weren't all that keen on it.
They wouldn't try any of the food. It's nachos, for crying out loud. They thought it was the weirdest thing. I have had kids, so this is a while ago, but I have had kids as recently, well, they're grown up now, as 7 years ago, stop me at the grocery store and say, Miss Annie, I still have my cooker, and sometimes I heat things up in it in the yard. I mean, nice. It's just the most brilliant thing. And those kids were so excited, just really excited about the whole project.
Sure. Well, that reminds me of the first cooker I built was from Cooking with the Sun by the Hallisey couple. They were both solar engineers. And I just put it in with an empty pot, and I see the thermometer going up to 280. And so I opened the window and I grabbed the pot with my bare hand because my brain is not thinking energy is energy. Heat is heat, and I think that's what the adults need is they tell them that. Oh, just grab the pot if you're really concerned about if it's not hot enough to kill germs. Oh, they'll be believers.
I don't think they were worried about that, but that's a good thing. I think they were mostly worried about that it was weird and something they'd never heard about, and it involved vegetables and fruit.
And there was no drive-through window.
Yeah,
that's right. This is true. In fact, a lot of the people I've interviewed, they've said they think people don't understand solar cooking because they just don't understand cooking anymore. People don't cook as much anymore. I mean, the microwave heats up something that's already cooked,
But they like to say Americans like they don't use their kitchen to cook in, they use it to heat things up in. And
Yeah.
this is the perfect slow cooker. It doesn't take any effort or energy. You just got to start early. So,
Yes.
Well, you had indicated that there is a community scale aspect to all of this. We've been
Yes.
talking about within your household, and if you expound on that a little bit. But I was also thinking, are there other applications? That this can go to, like grain drying, herb drying, things of that nature. That we may as well use that energy instead of fossil fuel energy.
Absolutely. One of my visits was to the Kerr Coal Sustainable Living Center in Arizona, where that's exactly what they did, is every possible application of solar energy, from the solar panels to solar cookers. They had a through-the-wall oven. Barbara Kerr designed one that just attached to the wall with the equator-facing window, so she would cook from as soon as the sun came up till when it came out. That was just a box cooker, but she designed a solar dryer that can dry tons of herbs and vegetables and fruits through the whole season. As you pick them, throw them in. You can barely dry them fast enough before the next load is in there, but you have bushels of dried fruit, vegetables, so forth.
Mhm.
So yeah,
What
there's
is,
all that.
what is the link for that?
Well, the Kerr Coles, I don't know what their link is, but the Kerr, Kerr, Barbara Kerr, and it was her partner. They both set it up, man, 40 years ago. She's like,
Right,
if
I'm
you saw
familiar. Hmm.
last night there was the Maria Telkas documentary. They called her the Sun Queen into solar energy in the 40s and 50s. And well, this is Kerr Cole kind of carried the torch for that. And
Hmm.
it's been maintained by a nonprofit to keep that going. Well, a couple in New Mexico replicated just about everything they did, and I was able to see it firsthand. Practically a walk-in vegetable dryer, where she said we reached the point where we almost need another one, because you harvest so much stuff when you manage what little rainwater they have. They get like 8 inches a year there in New Mexico, yet they're able to use it to do this, grow enough herbs and vegetables to keep the dryer full.
Yeah.
So yeah,
If you look at climate adaptation, the science studies, there are a number, like 20 different studies that have gone into a lot of the data that's being looked at by particularly forest farms right now, but or forest land or foresters. Anyway, but what you're talking about is where we have to go, with what we're doing, because if we look at the extreme weather events, and then we also look at the amount of precipitation minus or more.
sure.
We've got to move indoors, and we've got to move a lot of things that we need to be dried and preserved in some way.
Absolutely. When Jay mentioned the community volume cookers, there's several in development right now. One in France, they've developed the light fire. Or actually, I think it might be Denmark or Sweden. I don't know, in Europe, and it's basically a parabolic, only broken up into several mirrors at the end of a trailer, and on the trailer over the wheels is just a big box cooker, but it'll hit in the 5 to 600. It's a pizza oven heat range, this
Oh,
thing, and they
wow.
can do 8, 10, 12 loaves of bread at a time easily, dozens of pastries. And just a few days ago, the Console Foods Conference people in Portugal did a webinar on a bakery in Normandy, France. And speaking to another benefit is you get to know the cycles, the weather cycles, the climate cycles, the sunrise to sunset cycles. And this guy pointed out, we might have 3 days of clouds, but if we have 3 days of sun, we can build up our inventory. This bread is not going to go moldy overnight, as long as we make enough to keep track of it, and we get enough orders to keep it running. It's a profitable business. And when he points out to businesses that are considering it, well, so you might only save 10-20% on your energy costs. Well, that starts to stack up when you're running a big kitchen. So
Yeah.
and there's several of those in development. There's a fellow in Lesotho, Ivan Yahonitsky. It's just an aluminum tube about 8 inches in diameter,
Mm.
maybe 6 feet long, trough reflector, and they do little loaves of bread that they hand to kids that are walking to school, past their compound
Wow.
every day. And he's got a little. You can get the plans from him. I saw it at the Portugal conference in 2020, and I told him I'm going to hire a second story man to burgle his compound and get that for my collection because
Yeah.
I'm too lazy to build it myself.
Wow.
But anyway, there's just so many cool things happening with solar cooking these days.
Well, has there been any resistance or downside to all of this? Because it seems to me like there should be none, but there always is somewhere.
Well, yes, and one of my guests, Susan Regali, she's a chef in the Los Angeles area and a caterer. And the weird thing is the county of Los Angeles won't let her cook with her Sun Oven Villager, which is a big community cooker. 40, 50 loaves of bread at a time can fit in it. They won't let her bake for her cafe, the Humble Bee restaurant in Reseda. But they leave her alone for her catering. Why? Well, because that's a private event. I guess apparently they aren't concerned about her poisoning people at a private event with food poisoning, but but they're really worried about this is just and I think it's because in the code they probably don't have anything about regulating heat in a solar cooker, and whereas they have all sorts of rules about gas and electric ranges and wood stoves for pizza ovens and so forth. So it's a lot of ignorance, really. I don't think any like the county of Los Angeles, they would tend to be a lot more progressive, I'm sure, than other areas. And you'd think they would follow the lead of cities in France that are letting solar restaurants. We're going to the conference in Spain. They're finally opening it up again, Console Foods. And on the way there, we're driving to Marseille, where Le Presage restaurant is a solar restaurant. And the guy has already said, just name the date and he'll book a table and I can set up my cameras and so forth. He's got a solar restaurant because he's cooking away with all these different ways. There's a chef in Washington, D.C. that actually has a Sun oven, just that commercial box oven. And he gets a little battery-powered smoker that he blows smoke in to do one of his specialty meat dishes.
Cool.
So people adapt, and somehow he's either getting away with it and no one's told the authorities, or he's just doing, or they've said we don't care, just go ahead.
Okay, well, Luther, in the last 30 seconds, why don't you shamelessly plug your podcast?
Yes, we want to hear it.
Sure. Well, it's on YouTube, and it's the Big Blue Sun Museum of Solar Cooking. But if you just look up Solar Cooking Museum, YouTube / Solar Cooking Museum, that's my channel. But you want to learn everything else about solar cooking, don't Google solar cooking. Go to solarcooking.org. That's the wiki that Solar Cookers International has set up. Everything you want to know about solar cooking is there. Commercial models, DIY, people involved, so forth.
That's great. We'll have all that in the notes when it gets when the podcast posted.
Okay,
Great.
Well, you've been listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke, coming to you from Studio B, WOUB Radio in Athens, Ohio. We want to thank our solar cooking guest there, Luther Krueger. Thank you very much, Luther. We want to thank our always heated by the sun Emmy Award-winning producer, Adam Rich.
Poor Adam.
And we want to thank you for spending just a little bit of time with us. And as your grandmother hopefully told you, the secret to a happy and sustainable life is
play nice with others, Jay. Clean up your own mess for heaven's sake and eat some veggies for once.
All right, cooked in a solar cooker. All right.
Yes.
So until next time, bye-bye.
Thanks.